Hello, one and all, and welcome to a book recap of January 2022. My name is Kyrin, and I am from the Mere Mortals Book Reviews team. I'm here to examine everything that was going on in January of 2022, the books that I read and that one, my co-host, read, and just give some sort of off-the-cuff comments, some little random thoughts that maybe sum up the book review in 1 minute instead of 20 minutes. So we'll jump right into my favorite ones for the start here. The first was Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov. I ended up giving this a 7.5 out of 10. I really enjoyed this book. It was a bit different from what I was expecting. I was expecting sort of more risque, erotic scenes rather than an actual sort of narrative storyline to it. So I had a little bit of a misconception there. And one of the most interesting things of this was just how radically different your opinions can be. So I was discussing this with my dad, who had read the book maybe 30 years earlier. When was this published? 1955. So it could have easily been 40, maybe even 50 years, maybe not 50, 40 years. And we were discussing it, and his impression of the book was so much different. He got from it, and granted, this has been a long time, so his distortions of it, 40 years, 30 years of time can distort really anything. But his impression was that Humphrey, or was it Humphrey or Humbert, was sort of the good guy of the book in a way, that he was the innocent one, and that Lolita, the young girl, was the one who was sort of seducing him, and that I'm sure I'll speak for my dad here, where he is not condoning sexual relations with underage girls and anything like that. But his impression was that the author was saying, "Oh, this is actually, it's not a black and white thing," and that there might have been some part of her who was also responsible for the relationship. It wasn't just a one-way sort of thing. For me, I would have said, yeah, that could be somewhat true up until the end of the book. And then that was when sort of, for me, the hammer points came nailed home, and you're like, oh, this dude's just he's delusional. He's obsessed with this girl, and he's trying to justify everything that's going on, and to make it seem like it's sort of a consensual relationship. But by and large, over the whole course of their time together, I came away being like, no, he's kind of a piece of shit, and he's ruined this girl's life essentially by the interactions that he's had with her, the sexual interactions, the sort of grooming that he was doing, the obsessive behavior, the strictness that he imposed on her life. Sounded like she came out of it not for the better. Let's just put it that way. So interesting that you can have such radically different opinions on a book. And yeah, we had some discussions trying to point his argument my way, my argument his way, and yeah, found that was interesting. So that was quite a good read. I enjoyed reading that book. The next one was Nathaniel's Nutmeg. I gave this a 6.5 out of 10. This was a book that I'm glad I read. It sort of came to me. This was a recommendation from Oscar Murray, and I'll talk about that in the Boostagram section. But it was, I'd been meaning to learn more about the Dutch East India Company for a long time. I'd heard that it was the wealthiest company in the world at some stage. I actually got some of the numbers wrong in there. So I believe I said that Apple and Microsoft and things like that are around the $1 trillion. My co-host Juan informed me that they're closer to $2 trillion. But in any case, that still is the East India Company, Dutch East India, was still 4x times however big they are. So it was a huge conglomeration of wealth all stacked into a single entity, let's put it that way. And the actual times, the sailing, it sounded like mayhem. It didn't sound like a particularly nice time to be alive for anyone, to be honest. If you're willingly going out for these adventures to sea where you've got, a 1 in 3 chance of dying. Now, I think I was using 1 in 3 the whole time, but I could have had it around the other way. It could have been 2/3 of the people didn't come back from these adventures. And it was just like, you could die so many different ways: by accident, by scurvy, by the natives, by piracy, by, just name it. These people weren't dying of old age. Let's put it that way. So The actual spices and things like themselves, the trades, yeah, that was kind of interesting. The geography of how they came down the sort of side of Africa and then across into through to Indonesia, but they'd sometimes come across and make like a stop around just off of the South American continent and things like that, and Madagascar, and all these sorts of different things. It was pretty interesting. I'm glad I read the book. It informed me a bit more about geography, not just the history and spice and trade wars, but a solid read. The only thing I would say about the book that as like a caveat would be, one, it did feel like it had a very English bent to it. The author himself was English, and so I felt like the Dutch were maybe treated a bit harshly, and I'm wondering if a Dutch person wrote this same book, how the English would come out in it. So that's just one caveat there. And the other was that although this was taken from documents and history, it did seem to have a bit of the author's own flavor of this narrative history thrown into it. So it's hard to tell how much of this is, actually like it was, probably for the most part, but there was maybe some additions which could give you a false impression. So I gave that a 6.5 out of 10. I quite enjoyed that book as well. One book I didn't particularly enjoy was Leviathan by Thomas Hobbes. I'd been meaning to read this for a while. I'd heard just enough people quoting it. The famous quote of, let me find the actual page it was of the famous quote, page 102. So if I go to here, and we all know what this is, which is worst of all, continual fear and danger of violent death in the life of man, solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. What I found interesting was that my impression of him and this book in particular radically changed after reading it, or at least attempting to read it. And I didn't feel that he was condemning humanity and human nature as much as I have heard other people describe that quote as and describe his works as. I've came away with it more thinking, yes, he has some ideas that humans left on their own will inevitably lead to war, and this is why you need commonwealths, i.e. governments, to step in, and these can be democracies, they can be aristocracies, they can be monarchies, they can be whatever, but you need something to tamper down that human nature that leads to war. But I didn't feel like it was a wholesale condemnation of human nature neither. Like, I didn't feel like he was saying humans are irreparably bad and we need government. Like, government is the best thing in the world. We must have it. Like, it's so good, which was what I'd heard from this, particularly if you go back to my book review of, I think it was called Humankind by Rutger Bregman. You'll see that he was talking a lot about Hobbes in there, and this is one of the cases where I feel maybe I'm not so sure he treated him correctly there. I feel like he's been a little bit misinterpreted. And why? Well, probably because the book is so fucking stupidly hard to read. It is just dense, even with all the great work by the editors, David Johnston, in this particular case for the Norton Library version. It was just so difficult to read. There was sections in there about Christianity, the part 3. I pretty much just skipped all of that. There was just no benefit to that, and the meaning of words have changed, even though the style where it's written in a continuous sentence for multiple paragraphs, it's just really, really hard to read. So I can somewhat understand why there might be some misinterpretations, and maybe why I even have a misinterpretation, because this was a slog. This reminded me of being English class in high school and reading a book that I didn't want to read. I sat down this and I struggled through it, and I'm somewhat glad I did, but it was a heavy price to pay. So I ended up giving that a 3 out of 10. The other book that was done was by Juan, and then this was called 12.5 by one of his favorite people in the world, which is Gary Vaynerchuk. And so this is a book talking about emotions and, I suppose, characteristics and why he tries to embody these certain ones, how you can implement these into your daily lives and things like that. I feel that was the general theme of the book. If you actually want one of these as well, Gary Vee, if nothing else, is a very good marketer. And so he convinced Juan to buy, I believe it was 72 copies of this book, because he gets some NFTs with it. And so if you want a copy of this book, leave a comment somewhere down below, or message us, meremortalsinfo@gmail.com, and Juan will send it out to you, because he's got a copy of it. So yeah, there's lots of things in here about scenarios, about, your manager Olivia says she needs more proactiveness from you, etc., etc. This is how you could behave, and things like that. So I can definitely tell you, not my sort of book. I'm glad Juan read it, not me. And I think he wasn't overly impressed with that, which is sort of the general theme that comes from Gary Vee. He's a better speaker than he is a writer. But I won't comment too much on that. So those are the books that were read in January of 2022. I'm going to jump to the Boostagrams now. So for those who don't know, Boostagrams are a way of interacting directly with the show. You can send me a message via your favorite podcasting app. If you've got a good one, newpodcastapps.com. A good one is Fountain, which is how I'm actually accessing these. And you can write a comment, you can add some interpretation, things I got wrong, things I got right, etc., etc. I really, really, really do appreciate the feedback, and it helps support the show and whatnot. So let's get into the ones that were sent through in January 2022. First of all, there was a test from me. Thank you, Kyrin, for that. Another one was Oscar Merry. So, new to the pod, what was your favorite book of 2021? So this was sent using, I imagine sent using Fountain, 2001 sats. Thank you, Oscar. I have brought this up here. So it might be worth me doing a video, a proper, I'll do it in the actual podcast, like my favorite books. So the Mere Mortals podcast, that is. But I can tell you that I probably read about 70-ish books. I'll have to count them up correctly, but this was for most of 2021. Most of 2021, I was reading 2 books a week. So I was sort of hankering down and smashing them out, and it was really only in the last 3 months of 2021 where I stopped the gas a little bit, and I went back to doing 1 book review a week. Of that, I can easily tell you that my favorite book was, my favorite new book, I should say, was Lost Horizon by James Hilton. It was just a really fantastically written book about so many topics I love. So many cool things. Eastern philosophy. It had some existential threat. It had, like the stoic English character. It had just a bunch of combinations of things all piled into one book. The idea of Shangri-La, and this is where the word Shangri-La originated from. It was him who created it in this book. Just so many cool things all combined into one book, and I found it immensely. It was one of the only books I'd read in a while where I lost a bunch of sleep, because I would be reading it at night, and it's like, shit, I need to read 1 more chapter, and then I'd end up reading another 5 until I'm barely staying awake, and it's like, okay, got to close up for now. So new find, definitely Lost Horizon by James Hilton. That was a fantastic book. Another one which I just really enjoy, and it was my second time reading, was Catch-22 by Joseph Heller, and this is one of the funniest books you'll ever read. I think it really captures this anti-war, anti-violent sentiment, but also absurdity and paradox, and really those are things that I care about a lot. I find really interesting, and so those were 2 sort of things wrapped up together in that book as well, which it's just so funny. It's one of the best comedic books I've come across personally. Some other good shout outs would be Cat's Cradle by Kurt Vonnegut, would be The Grapes of Wrath by how I'm forgetting his name. I should know that. The man who wrote Of Mice and Men, John Steinbeck. And Start With Why by Simon Sinek. That was also another one which sort of surprised me, because I'm not usually into those sorts of books. But those are a couple there. But yeah, if you're really interested, tune into the Mere Mortals podcast sometime. and I'll do a big review of that. It will be like 2021 book review or something along those lines. Oscar again, he says, this one brought me back and defo gonna read it again. Nathaniel's Nutmeg, 2200 sats. Thank you very much, Oscar. And that was a recommendation by him, Nathaniel's Nutmeg. So no, thank you, Oscar. It was a great read, and I did enjoy myself a lot. The next two are from Peter. I'm not exactly sure which app he sent these through, so I won't be able to list that, but 1,222 sats. And he says, RE Nathaniel's Nutmeg. Stories like these make me want to take up sailing. I'll file that under my 10-year goals, aka before I die. Peter, what is wrong with you, mate? Why would you want... Honestly, like, I came away from that book just thinking, I never want to go sailing. That just sounds like an awful existence. The disease, the scurvy, the sort of being trapped with men on a boat, the many different ways you could die or get injured, I guess the adventure of it, the sailing into unknown lands, maybe that had an appeal to them, but that didn't really strike out at me from the book. What struck out at me was a lot of desperate people doing some desperate things for big money, for really, amazing wealth. And even then, the little guy still gets the shit kicked out of him because he can't, he gets searched for spice on his way home. He's not even allowed to have a handful of it because, that'll dig into the profits of the company or whatnot. So, yeah, for me personally, I read that book. I was like, nah, I'm good with sailing. I think I'll stick to land and whatnot. But thank you, Peter. And then his last one was 2,200 sats. And so he says, I'm going to disagree with your... So there's on Leviathan. I'm going to disagree with your view that people in this day and age hold politicians more to account for breaking the law. Mandating vaccines is highly immoral and illegal in itself, but most people love complying with these dictates. Most people love their shackles. Most people love their masters and being told what to do. It makes them feel safe, and to them, that's priceless. Yeah, I can understand this. When I was saying that, I would think I was referring more to overt individual acts. So I would say the things with vaccines, and I'm on board with that. I think mandating anything is really stupid. I think people should not be coerced into really anything, and that there should just be enough incentives one way or the other for people to make their choices and whatnot. I'm okay with like influencing things, but straight up saying you have to do this, yeah, I find that stupid as well. What I was mostly referring to when I said that was, you see a politician just do something so overt, so obviously corrupt that they can't get away with it. And and why this came up in the context of this book was Thomas Hobbes was saying, the Leviathan, the monarch, so this is the person who controls the country or people who control the country, they don't have to play by their own rules that the other normal people do. So if the sovereign says you're only allowed to own 3 acres of land, it's okay for the sovereign to own 300 or 3,000. And I was saying nowadays, I don't think you can get away with it as an individual aspect like that if you're in a position of power. But yes, definitely with regards to some other things, there are still a lot of people who will just go with the flow. And honestly, like for large parts of my decision making, I just go with the flow as well. I got the vaccine. I didn't think too much of it, mostly because I got the yellow fever vaccine in Colombia, and I didn't think too much of that. And honestly, that's probably way more sketchy than getting the corona one. But there's definitely aspects, and I think it's just up to the individual where they draw that line as well. But yes, thank you for making that point, and I'll be sure to clarify that more nowadays. And you know what? I could be totally wrong. There could still be politicians, and there probably are. It just depends on your level. I know in the US, I've been hearing stuff about politicians and people working at the Fed buying stocks certain stocks. That seems to me, and considering they have the influence over the money and what they decide will affect the whole market, that seems pretty corrupt to me. But they still got their jobs. So what do I know? So thank you everyone. So that is Oscar and Peter who contributed to the and myself who contributed to the podcast. It does make a big difference to me. The support really does help. Those Satoshis, I spread them around the system trying to grow the pie, and I really do appreciate it. I really do. So thank you very much for that. We'll get now onto the final part, which is what's coming up. What's coming up for February of 2022? I can give you a sneak peek here. I've got my boina on, which is the Argentinian version of a beret, and this is because I am reading a book by Albert Camus, The Myth of Sisyphus. So he speaks French. That's my link there. It's a tenuous link, but I'll go with it. And so The Myth of Sisyphus, so this is looking at absurdism. You wonder why I like books like the Cat's Cradle, for example, or even Lost Horizon. There are aspects of this absurd idea. I really enjoy this idea of two things clashing together and sort of staying in that middle point, that boundary line, the boundary point, the precipice of something that is true in one context, true in another context, and then sort of trying to meld them together. I really like that. So The Myth of Sisyphus is one. I am also reading Snow Crash because I keep hearing about metaverse, so felt like I should dive into that book and see what it's all about. I've got some more philosophical books coming up. Which ones of those I'll particularly get to, I'm not too sure at the moment, but a bunch of fun things coming up as always. And I really do hope that you've enjoyed this little book recap, detailing everything that was going on in January 2022. Going to keep continuing to do this podcast as long as I can, and once again your support really helps make that happen. So go to newpodcastapps.com, get a good app. Fountain is a pretty good one, Breeze is a good one, Castomatic, Podfriend, they're all good ones, and send me through a Boostagram. I really do appreciate that. Other than that, I hope you're having a fantastic day wherever you are in the world. Coding out.